My name is Ethan, or at least, that's who I was in my past life. Now, I'm just Elias Thorne, the perpetually ill and unremarkable younger brother of the hero's best friend. I'd love to say my life is a wild fantasy, but it's really just a subplot in someone else's epic love story. My world is the setting for The Dragon's Embrace, a wildly popular web novel I binged right before my untimely demise. Don't ask. It involved a very startled pigeon and a banana peel. It was a classic BL story, a stoic, powerful dragon shifter named Salus falls for the kind, gentle human scholar, Adrian. The main plot was a roller coaster of dramatic misunderstandings, passionate confessions, and high-stakes magical battles. And me, I'm the disposable character. The one who gets a brief mention in chapter 12 when Salus visits his best friend, Julian, who happens to be my older brother. My sole purpose in the novel was to have a conveniently timed coughing fit, which would give Julian an excuse to leave the room and allow Salus and Adrian to have their pivotal, staring at each other from across the library. It was a one-and-done deal. My mission in this new life is simple: avoid my predetermined plot point at all costs. I will not have a coughing fit. I will not be a narrative device. I've spent the last 6 years meticulously building up my health, drinking disgustingly bitter herbal teas, and running laps around the family estate. My brother, Julian, thinks it's a phase. My parents think I'm finally coming into my own. I just think I'm avoiding the plot. Things are going smoothly until today. I'm sitting in the library, a safe distance from the main characters, when Julian bursts in, 2 other figures in tow. One is Julian's new friend, the one he keeps raving about, the one with impossibly golden eyes and a commanding presence. It's Salus. And right behind him is Adrian, clutching a stack of books and looking completely overwhelmed. My heart plummets. I check my mental timeline. Chapter 12. The library scene. The pivotal, dramatic coughing fit that sends the hero, Salus, on a quest to find a cure for my character's supposed illness. As a reborn side character, I know this is my chance to break free from the narrative. I clench my jaw, refusing to cough. But the script is stronger than me. A single, quiet cough escapes my lips. Salus's golden eyes snap towards me, his gaze no longer polite but sharp and analytical. His friend, Adrian, asks if I'm alright, but Salus ignores him, stepping closer. Your energy feels fragmented, he says, his voice a low rumble. Not ill, but displaced. Panic sets in. He can feel that I'm not from this world. I stammer an excuse about dust, but Salus simply watches me with a calculating stare. The hero, the one who was meant to find his true love, is now staring at me like a bug in the code. Knowing my days of hiding are over, I pack a small bag and use a secret passage to make a desperate escape. As I emerge into the night, I see 2 figures waiting by the gates, Adrian and Salus. Salus knew I would run. With a sigh of utter defeat, I walk out of the shadows. There's no escaping him. Salus explains my fragmented energy is a disharmony that attracts the corrupted, creatures of shadow who feed on chaos. He gives me an ultimatum: come with him and be contained, or run and become their target. I look at his outstretched hand, and in a final moment of surrender, I take it. The carriage ride to the Imperial Palace is silent. I have traded one cage for another, but at least this one feels safer. We arrive at his private quarters, a solitary tower, and he reveals his plan. He won't just heal me, he will study me, learn why I am here, and teach me to contain my fragmented energy. I will protect my world, he says, his eyes fixed on mine, from others like you. Or, from the things you attract. I am no longer a side character. I am a threat that the hero is desperate to understand. The tower room I was given was more of a cell than a guest room. The walls were smooth, unadorned stone, and the single window was barred. It was clear this was a place for containment, not comfort. Salus didn't return until morning, bringing with him a simple tray of food and a somber expression. Eat, he said, setting the tray on a small table. He didn't sit, but moved to the center of the room, pulling out a small, intricate compass from his cloak. Its needle didn't point north. It quivered and spun erratically in my direction. This is an empathic compass, he explained, holding it steady. It measures the resonance of magical energies. The more unstable the energy, the more the needle spins. Your presence makes it feel like a child's toy. My own energy is a steady, unwavering hum. Adrian's is a gentle warmth. But yours, he shook his head, looking more fascinated than concerned. Yours is a storm. I ate my bread and cheese, the silence punctuated only by the nervous tapping of the compass against his thumb. What is it you hope to find? I asked, my voice a whisper. The source, he answered, his eyes still fixed on the compass. A disharmony of this magnitude cannot simply exist. It has to come from somewhere. My power allows me to see the path of a soul's energy. Most people's energy is a single, clear river. Yours is like two rivers trying to flow in the same space, creating a constant, violent churn. My breath hitched. He was talking about my two lives. He wasn't just a powerful hero, he was a human lie detector, a magical investigator. He could feel my secret. What you call your ailment is not a physical sickness, he continued, finally looking at me. It is a conflict of existence. And that conflict, it is a delicious prize for the corrupted. They will seek you out. And when they find you, they will try to tear you apart, to consume the raw energy of your fractured soul. His words were not a threat, but a grim statement of fact. I had been foolish to think I could simply escape the plot. I wasn't just a side character anymore, I was the target of a new, terrifying part of the story, and the hero was my only hope. And my captor. A chill I couldn't explain snaked up my spine. It had nothing to do with the cool stone of the tower and everything to do with Salus's words. As if on cue, a low scraping sound echoed from somewhere above us. Salus's head snapped up, the empathic compass clattering onto the table. It had stopped spinning and was now pointing straight up at the ceiling, its needle a frantic, shivering blur. Too soon, he muttered, his jaw tight. They shouldn't have found us this quickly. The shadows in the corners of the room deepened, twisting and coalescing into vague, monstrous forms. The air grew cold, and a putrid, coppery smell filled my nose. My heart hammered against my ribs as the forms began to take shape, not fully solid, but like a living absence of light. They were the corrupted. One of them lunged forward, a shadowy claw aimed directly at my chest. It was a silent, terrifying assault. Before I could even react, Salus moved. He didn't draw a weapon. Instead, he raised his hand, and a wall of incandescent golden light erupted between me and the creature. The shadow screamed, a sound that was more a tearing of reality than a physical noise, and recoiled, dissipating into wisps of dark smoke. But there were more. A dozen, perhaps more, began to slide down the walls, their grotesque forms like ink blots come to life. They seemed to be drawn to me, their non-existent eyes fixed on my very essence. Stay behind me, Salus commanded, his voice a low growl. He was no longer the calm, princely figure. He was a force of nature, his golden eyes glowing with a fierce inner light. He began to chant in a language I didn't recognize, and a cascade of brilliant, golden fire erupted from his hands, scorching the stone and forcing the corrupted to retreat. They didn't give up, however. They began to circle us, their whispers now audible in my mind, a chorus of hungry, discordant voices. Fractured, displaced, ours. I had never felt so vulnerable. My two lives, the constant churn Salus had described, felt like a gaping wound, a beacon for these terrifying creatures. And the only thing standing between them and me was my captor. Salus continued his incantation, but I could see the strain on his face. This was not a simple fight. The corrupted were relentless, and they were everywhere. He was a beacon of light against a tide of darkness, but he was alone. One of the shadows managed to get past his defenses, its icy fingers brushing against my arm. A jolt of pure, agonizing cold shot through me, and I cried out, falling back against the wall. Salus's head snapped to me. The momentary distraction was all they needed. Dozens of shadows lunged forward, overwhelming his barrier. He roared in defiance, a torrent of pure magic surging from him, but it was clear we were outnumbered. The plot was not just happening around me anymore, it was actively trying to consume me. Now that the threat is immediate and Salus is in trouble, what should happen next? The icy touch didn't just hurt, it was a dissonant chord, a painful sound in the core of my being that resonated with the storm Salus had described. And in that moment of pure terror, a part of me, the part that remembered a different life, a different language, snapped into focus. The corrupted were drawn to my chaos, but what if that chaos wasn't just a flaw? What if it was a key? I ignored the chilling whispers and focused on the one stable thing in the room, Salus's golden light. His radiance was faltering, but it was still a powerful, unwavering beacon. I reached out, not with my hand, but with the very core of my fractured soul. A new sensation erupted within me. It wasn't a torrent of magic or a blast of power, but a click, like two pieces of a puzzle finally slotting into place. The two swirling rivers Salus saw in me found their rhythm, and they didn't just merge with Salus's energy, they amplified it. My fragmented existence, the very thing that made me a target, became a conduit. Salus's eyes widened in shock as his golden light surged, becoming a blinding, all-consuming fire. The shadows shrieked in unison, a sound of pure agony, and were consumed by the brilliant radiance. The putrid smell vanished, the air grew warm again, and the room was suddenly still. When the light faded, we were left standing in a room of scorched stone, completely alone. Salus was staring at me, his golden eyes no longer guarded but filled with a profound sense of awe. He reached out and gently touched my arm where the corrupted shadow had brushed me, a small, involuntary shiver going through him. You didn't just help me, he whispered, his voice hoarse. You fit with me. Your fragmented energy, it completed mine. I have never felt anything so right. And as he looked at me, I finally understood. I wasn't a side character anymore. I was the one the hero was searching for, not to heal, but to be whole. And it was clear from the way he looked at me that this was the beginning of a different story altogether. The icy touch didn't just hurt. It was a dissonant chord, a painful sound in the core of my being that resonated with the storm Salus had described. And in that moment of pure terror, a part of me, the part that remembered a different life, a different language, snapped into focus. The corrupted were drawn to my chaos, but what if that chaos wasn't just a flaw? What if it was a key? I ignored the chilling whispers and focused on the one stable thing in the room, Salus's golden light. His radiance was faltering, but it was still a powerful, unwavering beacon. I reached out, not with my hand, but with the very core of my fractured soul. A new sensation erupted within me. It wasn't a torrent of magic or a blast of power, but a click, like two pieces of a puzzle finally slotting into place. The two swirling rivers Salus saw in me found their rhythm, and they didn't just merge with Salus's energy, they amplified it. My fragmented existence, the very thing that made me a target, became a conduit. Salus's eyes widened in shock as his golden light surged, becoming a blinding, all-consuming fire. The shadows shrieked in unison, a sound of pure agony, and were consumed by the brilliant radiance. The putrid smell vanished, the air grew warm again, and the room was suddenly still. When the light faded, we were left standing in a room of scorched stone, completely alone. Salus was staring at me, his golden eyes no longer guarded but filled with a profound sense of awe. He reached out and gently touched my arm where the corrupted shadow had brushed me, a small, involuntary shiver going through him. You didn't just help me, he whispered, his voice hoarse. You fit with me. Your fragmented energy, it completed mine. I have never felt anything so right. And as he looked at me, I finally understood. I wasn't a side character anymore. I was the one the hero was searching for, not to heal, but to be whole. And it was clear from the way he looked at me that this was the beginning of a different story altogether. The quiet that followed was more profound than any silence I had ever known. Salus still held my arm, his thumb tracing a slow circle on my skin, his gaze a mixture of wonder and disbelief. My power, he said, his voice barely a whisper, is harmony. It cleanses, it heals, it brings balance. But yours is a dissonance that somehow creates a new, more powerful harmony when it connects with mine. It is a new song. I could feel it, too. A gentle hum, a kind of peace that I hadn't known since I had been reborn into this world. My very core felt aligned, settled. The feeling of being two separate souls fighting for control was gone, replaced by a sense of completeness I had never experienced. But the moment of peace was fleeting. Salus's expression suddenly hardened, and his hand dropped from my arm. He looked toward the barred window, his golden eyes narrowing. I followed his gaze, but I saw nothing. "The corrupted were feeding off of your chaos," he said, his voice now low and dangerous. "They were drawn to the dissonance, the storm. But what we just did, what we created together, that wasn't just harmony. It was a perfect, blinding resonance. And that, too, is a beacon." My heart sank. My escape had failed, and now my attempt to help had made me an even bigger target. The plot was not just drawing me in, it was now actively hunting me. The whispers from the corrupted hadn't vanished. They had just changed. They were no longer the chaotic, hungry voices I had heard before. Now, they were a single, focused word, echoing in the quiet room. "King." The word resonated not just in the air, but in the depths of my soul. Salus's golden eyes were no longer on the window, but on me, filled with a new kind of fear. "The corrupted are just fragments," he said, his voice strained. "They are the chaotic echoes of a fractured mind, the shadow of a fallen god. But the king is the source. It is the consciousness that fell into chaos and corrupted the world. It's what my power was meant to fight, but my power alone can only bring temporary balance. The king, it wants to consume all light, all order, and all harmony. And now, you and I, together, are the greatest challenge to its existence." He took a step closer, his hand reaching for my face, his thumb gently stroking my cheek. "What we did wasn't just magic. It was a perfect alignment of two souls. We didn't just defeat the corrupted, we hurt the king. And that made us a priority. It will not stop until it has us both, to either consume or corrupt our power." The very foundation of the tower groaned, a low, ominous rumble that sent a tremor through the floor. A crack, thin as a spiderweb, snaked across the stone wall. This wasn't a simple attack, it was an act of raw, focused rage. "It knows where we are," Salus whispered, his gaze intense. "There is no running anymore. We have a choice, Elias. We can either stand here and let it tear down this tower, or we can face it." He didn't ask me what I wanted to do. Instead, he simply looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. He wasn't just my captor anymore, he was my other half, the one person in this world who understood what I was. I stood, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. The ground trembled beneath my feet. Salus was right, there was no running. We had just made ourselves a primary target, and the king was coming for us. He didn't speak, but a silent understanding passed between us. We moved to the center of the room, our hands finding each other and lacing together. Our combined energy hummed, a low, resonant thrum that felt both ancient and new. He was the anchor, his golden light a shield, and I was the storm, a wild and unpredictable torrent of magic. We were a single, powerful entity. The walls began to crack, the stone groaning under the immense pressure of the king's will. An inky darkness began to seep through the fissures, twisting into grotesque faces that silently screamed in agony. This wasn't a wave of corrupted, this was the raw, undiluted chaos of the king itself. Salus raised our joined hands, and the golden light surged, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. "It wants us, Elias," he said, his voice a battle cry. "It wants our song." We fought as one. I focused on his golden light, amplifying it, feeding it my own chaotic energy to create a blinding white fire. Salus directed the torrent, his face a mask of fierce concentration as he pushed back the tendrils of darkness. But the king was relentless. It wasn't just an enemy we were fighting, it was a concept, a fundamental force of nature. The pressure intensified, and I felt a searing pain in my core as the king's will broke through our defenses. It was a cold, agonizing touch that tried to tear my very essence apart. I cried out, my grip on Salus's hand faltering. He looked at me, his golden eyes full of a love so profound it hurt to witness. He saw my pain, and in a single moment of clarity, he knew what had to be done. "Live," he said, his voice filled with a final, desperate resolve. He pushed me back, his hands gently cupping my face. Before I could even protest, his body began to glow, his golden light growing brighter and brighter until it was an unbearable, divine white. He was focusing all of his power, not on destroying the king, but on containing it. He was a barrier, a shield, a final act of sacrifice. I watched in horror as the king's inky shadows swirled around him, consuming his brilliant light. He smiled, a final, sorrowful smile, before his form dissolved into a shower of golden particles, a silent surrender of his essence. The roar of the king was one of triumph, but it was also a roar of pain. Salus's light had not been destroyed, it had been absorbed, a perfect harmony swallowed by chaos. The entire tower fell silent, and the pressure vanished. All that remained was the chilling sound of a single word, now echoing from within me. Ours. He was gone, and I was left alone, a side character once more, but this time, carrying the ghost of the hero within my soul. The plot hadn't just changed, it had become my burden. I don't remember how long I stayed in the rubble. It could have been minutes or years. The world was a muffled echo, a silent movie playing around me as I knelt amidst the broken stone, the smell of scorched earth and vanished magic heavy in the air. The ghost of Salus's essence, his perfect, steady harmony, now lived within my soul, a quiet hum that was both a comfort and a constant, aching reminder of my loss. Days turned into weeks. I wandered the streets, a phantom among people, my eyes seeing only the cracks in the world where the corrupted had been. My own fragmented energy, once a frantic storm, was now calm, tempered by Salus's sacrifice. It was an eerie peace, a stillness that felt like a tomb. I adapted to my new life as a drifter, always on the move to avoid the lingering remnants of the king's attention. But one night, as I slept under a canopy of stars, a dream came to me. It wasn't a memory, but a vision. I was in a different world, a lush forest filled with golden light and a gentle, familiar song. I saw Salus there, not as a powerful hero, but as a young boy, his eyes a brilliant, innocent gold. He was laughing, a sound that resonated with the perfect harmony in my soul. When I woke, the ghost of his presence wasn't just a memory, it was a compass. It no longer led me to hide or run. It pointed forward, to a new purpose. My fragmented soul, now a bridge between two worlds, had found a new, quiet purpose. My new life became a quest. I didn't know how to get to this other world, but I knew I had to. It was the only way to fulfill the promise in Salus's final smile. I had been a side character, a part of a story I hadn't wanted. But now, I was the hero of a new one, a story about a second chance and a promise of reunion. I would find Salus, no matter where he was. In a different world, in a field bathed in perpetual sunlight, a young boy with hair the color of midnight stirred in his sleep. His name was Leo. He was only 5, but his eyes, when they opened, were the color of molten gold, a shade no one in his village had ever seen. He didn't know why, but sometimes a quiet, steady song would hum in his soul, a melody of peace and purpose that made him feel safe. He didn't know what a compass was, but the humming in his heart always pointed in a single, unyielding direction. He would often dream of a storm, a violent, beautiful storm of energy, and in the heart of it, a face he couldn't quite remember, a face that felt like home. He would wake from the dream with a deep sense of longing, a profound sadness that he couldn't explain. He would sit in the field and close his eyes, listening to the golden song in his soul, and wait for the day when his storm finally returned. Years passed. Elias learned to hone his power, not for combat, but for a singular purpose. The gentle hum of Salus's essence within him became a guide, showing him glimpses of the other world. He saw Leo, a boy growing up, a child with eyes of gold and a quiet sadness. Each glimpse was a renewed surge of hope, a reminder of his mission. He learned to shift between realities, a difficult and dangerous process that felt like tearing his very soul in two. After countless failed attempts and close calls, the humming in his soul became a beacon, a clear, unmistakable pull. He closed his eyes and pushed all of his energy into the shift, a final, desperate gamble. When he opened them, he was no longer in the ruined world of the king, but in a field filled with perpetual sunlight. The air was clean, and the hum in his soul was no longer a ghost but a vibrant, living song. He took a step, and the ground felt solid. He looked up, and a boy stood before him, his golden eyes wide with a mixture of recognition and shock. The boy was Leo, but Elias didn't see a boy. He saw Salus, his hero, his other half. "You came," Leo whispered, a sound that carried the echo of Salus's voice. Elias knelt, a wave of relief so powerful it brought tears to his eyes. "I promised I would," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He reached out, and this time, the boy didn't flinch. He took Elias's hand, and the golden light from Salus's essence flowed from Elias into Leo, a seamless, perfect connection. The humming in both of their souls surged, a song of two halves finally reunited. They were home, together, and for the first time in both of their lives, the story had a happy ending.